Ahoy, everyone! I hope you are all well. I saw another movie. I watched Lured from 1947, starring Lucille Ball, and directed by a certain Douglas Sirk, who I honestly knew nothing about until I saw this movie, but apparently he's a big deal to people who know about him. So I sometimes like to go back and try to find old forgotten gems in the old early decades of Hollywood. Growing up, I think most people will watch movies like The Wizard of Oz and 12 Angry Men, Gone with the Wind, just to name a few. But these are just things that, I've grown up with, and I sometimes wonder, are there other great films that I was not aware of? Other movies that were great but fell through the cracks of history and deserve to be dug up and revisited. I have on occasion looked up older movies and said to myself, hey, maybe I should check that out, and I have found a few gems over the years. Like I found movies like A Foreign Affair, a Billy Wilder movie. And then later on, this past year, I found the movie The Uninvited. And, those are great films that I never heard of and I never watched until much later in life, and I'm glad I found them. So while perusing the internet, I noticed this movie called Lured, and I'm like, let me do a little research, and it has like 100% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it stars Lucille Ball, and I'm like, maybe this is good, maybe this is some forgotten classic that people need to check out and enjoy. So the film takes place in England, and it's about Scotland Yard hiring Lucille Ball to help them track down a serial killer who lures women with newspaper ads asking for women who want to date. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink, and then he kills them. So they ask Lucille Ball to answer all these ads and to be the bait. All the while, she is approached by a well-to-do, charming man named Robert Fleming, who has a genuine interest in her. But is he interested in her for the right reasons? Is he secretly the killer? Oh no, what will happen? And then there's hijinks. So this movie was, at the very least, very interesting to watch. It's interesting watching good filming, good directing, and good acting all in an older movie and saying, yeah, look at the effort that goes into some of these movies. And it's especially nice seeing, Lucille Ball acting before I Love Lucy, because she really can act, and she actually has a very broad capacity for being different kinds of people. It's nice learning that about Lucille Ball. And you learn a lot of things watching this movie. I'm all about the education. So near the beginning of the film, Ball works at this, her whole thing is she's an American actress who came over to England with a stage play that flopped, and she was just kind of stuck there, so she had to try her luck at different things. And she's a paid dancer at a dance club. What this means is you have a dance club where couples go to dance, but then you have all these women sitting off to the side who are pretty, and you pay money to let them dance with you. I've never heard of this, but I guess I see no reason why this would not be a thing. It's not quite whoring yourself out, but there's still a very cynical element to it. The men are obviously, paying for the prettiest women to dance with them, and then they're like, hey, darling, when do you get out of work? And, Lucille Ball's like, sorry, can't go home with patients, and I work till 2. Can't go home with patrons, that is, not patients. And then, of course, Lucille Ball is trying to get out of work early for some other reason. Her boss is like, no, you stay at work or you're fired, kind of a deal. So it's not a whorehouse, but it still has it's still very cynical how the women are treated. And from there, Lucille Ball one of her friends gets murdered by this serial killer, and the police end up hiring Lucille Ball to be a detective essentially, and be a member of the Scotland Yard, and to help them track this guy down. And and it ends up, they end up discovering all these other weird people along the way, and arresting other criminals who were not part of the serial killer. So at some point they stumble into a criminal ring who essentially kidnaps women to South America to sell them into slavery. In this case, they tell them, oh, you're pretty, try your luck in South America, we will make you a celebrity. And they talk about, like, oh yes, they take them to South America and sell them as domestic servants. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Interesting. So that's what they called it back then. Domestic servants. So it's like, okay, interesting. So in 1947, this is the kind of stuff that possibly went on in England. That it was the kind of thing that Scotland Yard had to upend and crack down on. Here's a pitch for a movie. Remember Taken with Liam Neeson saving his daughter from human sex traffickers? Make a movie and call it Taken into the Takenverse, and Liam Neeson has to go back in time to fight sex traffickers in England in the late 40s. How's that? I'd see it. One thing I find interesting about visiting these kinds of films as an adult is when you're a kid, you see older films as being very clean and sanitized. But as an adult, you pick up on the things that are hidden, like sex and sexual tension and implied meaning. And this movie is full of that. So it's like, oh, okay, this nasty stuff is here. It's just very, very hidden and disguised. So at the end of the day, I thought everything about this movie was very well done. But do I give a toss? And sadly, not really. I will say, like, about a year ago or so, I decided to watch a whole bunch of random old detective films, or, I don't know, mystery thriller films from the 40s. And I watched movies like Out of the Past and The Big Sleep. And I would say Lured is better than those two movies. But I think I'm feeling that it feels a lot like a lot of modern films, just set in the 1940s. So it's interesting education in terms of, oh, they're making these kinds of films back in the 40s, but did you have to watch it? It would be like if you watched a very good chick flick romance from the 90s, and then let's say you watched a very good chick flick romance, if such a thing existed, in the 40s, but it was kind of hit the same beats. The most you're doing is learning, like, okay, this kind of thing existed back then also, but do I have to watch this over the 90s movie? So, like, there's a thing called pulp fiction, which often is mass-produced literature in specific genres that pander to certain tastes, like people who love cheap sci-fi, people who love mystery, people who love, I don't know, military intrigue or whatever. And it's mass-produced and people love to read it, but it probably doesn't hold up too much in the grand scheme of things. So I think Lured is kind of like that. Like, it's a well-made, murder, mystery, serial killer film, but I think it mostly just fits into the tastes of people who are like, oh, I love this kind of thing. So they just gotta watch it. There's a lot of black and white World War II films that I think are okay but not very good, but maybe if you're just like an older person who just really loves, old World War II films, that's just your jam, they'll work really well for you. So likewise, Lured, like, it was, I would say, an A+ in terms of what it was trying to do. It's just, in its educational, I thought to myself, like, okay, this is definitely, I can see where this probably caused the butterfly effect that eventually led to movies like Seven from 1995. But it really is just a specific taste for a specific audience, and there's no pressing need to have to see this other than education and interest, and, learning that Lucille Ball was a really great actress. So what did we learn, audience? I got some idea of how far back stories about serial killers who prey on women goes, or just serial killer movies in general. I'm sure there are older ones, but I suspect films like this, I'm sure there are older ones, but this is just one. It gave me perspective on the crime scene in England, with the gang who take advantage of young women, the human trafficking gang. So I say, okay, interesting, that existed in England back then. That and the dance club where men pay for hot women to dance with them. If you're just craving some black and white film noir from the late 40s, I think this will probably satisfy you. For me, it's education. I can mark it off my list. I don't think I'll ever need to revisit this again. Have a good night, everyone.